one of the things that takes a little while to get the game started and on the road is generating your family. You have to roll up 3 characters. That doesn't sound like a whole hell of a lot. It's only 3 die rolls for each. If you're filling this out, maybe it's not that big a deal, but I've decided to go with these genealogical charts. Why? Well, the main reason is it presents a better view of the game over time. These are more helpful when you pass them around from person to person. There's no question about that. I'm going to have to annotate marriages in a manner which, may involve passing some of these around for the visitors to a dynasty, as it were, the wives in general. What have we come up with so far? Our Italian family has decent stats and a male heir. Our German family, good strength on Charles and the king. Again, a male heir. Now, it's possible this game could become very problematic. Like if everyone has male heirs only, early on, if you only roll males or only roll females. But that's highly unlikely compared to somebody dying early. Here's the Spanish dynasty. Okay stats, I guess. With a female, which means we got potential problems there, right? But on the other hand, somebody had better be producing females. The Caput dynasty in France has a male. Not a great prospect. I think I'm going to have to cut this thing off or tuck it somewhere. And the plant heads in England have an exceedingly good king with only a daughter to begin with. Now, only a daughter sounds terrible, but a daughter can be very, very valuable. The danger to it, of course, though, is if I never have a male heir, then there are potential problems. I think I'm set up. That took a fair amount of time to roll up and draw all those, and I've got my word. Part of it was finding the paper. Instead of just using pads of paper, which I actually have a fair number of, but I bought them. I had to scrounge my scrap paper. And got to be careful not to show you the other side of it and hope that it doesn't show through on the video quality, because some of them may have sensitive information on them. But yeah, that's what we're sitting on. Certainly no more sensitive than some of the stuff the U.S. government officials have exposed accidentally on pieces of paper in the recent past. But yeah, the amount of effort for that, now I need a break. I'm not really ready to kick off and start. But one thing I can do to begin things is I can throw my king counters in every capital. But clearly, like I've said, the historical reality is just so skewed. One thing that I forgot to mention, this is a period of great chaos in the Holy Roman Empire. Unlike France and England, and Castile for that matter, the Holy Roman Emperor was an elected position, and it was not... It was in a period of dynastic turmoil. There were periods in the medieval time when there would be successions of several kings in a row when the crown was strong enough, when the imperial crown was strong enough to ensure the succession of the next follower. And obviously, once you get to the Habsburgs, that changes. But you're no longer talking about a country anymore at that point. You're talking about some kind of weird amalgamation where it's always been. It was always somewhat weird compared to the other nations, but because it never centralized the crown in quite the same way. But when you get to the Habsburgs, what you've got, and that period, what you've got is several major players, which you had all along in the imperial territory, but less interested in the empire and more interested in devoting to make their own nation states in the same way that they had seen France and England develop into nation states. Real power bases. Now, what you have to remember is not that long before this, I mean, France is still pretty iffy at this point. England is fairly consolidated and has been really since the Norman conquest in terms of like, yes, it's got its problems and its rebellions but the crown generally had a great deal of power anywhere they went. In France, and certainly in the Empire, things were more questionable. France especially was very weak at one point, but at this time, I think France is becoming more centralized. And of course, Italy is part of the Empire, for the most part. Interesting here, I've been avoiding playing, but with the concept of trying to handle this as a dynastic chart versus the game supplied little cards or sheets. Cards would have been more useful, but again, you'd have to give one hell of a large pack. There's a chance you could go through all these little sheets in the course of a single game, and that's one of my worries with using them. I've not seen it because the one time we played, we gave up real quick. We got through a couple of turns, really. I mean, I don't even know if we made it to marriages, just because the cost of figuring out and explaining the rules from a Games Workshop game that looks like a simple little game, but it's got some pretty in-depth rules outside of, and it really takes its time explaining them, kind of like me. But this same problem of the dynastic chart versus individual character cards is one that I'm used to. I've had to cope with this for a long, long time within the game that maybe this evoked in me, or in conjunction with some others that I want to make, that is impossible. But one of the hurdles that I came to was that representation, where I wasn't even sure I wanted to represent all the characters who were present in much detail, because there are a lot of people in the game where the only thing that really matters is what they spawn, both male and female. It's a matter of with the males, well, because, and the main reason being that females can't hold office or whatever. So what do you want to give them? What kind of role do you want to give them some sort of equality in the game? And this clearly does not. And I don't mean equality in terms of the power they have, but in terms of the detail to which the game wants to look into them. So I took that, hey, it's a patriarchal society. Yes, there were women who were extraordinary and did things on their own. And there were women who had an extreme influence on their husband. The latter effect can be reflected, I think, very well just by the husband's stats, or maybe, roll for extraordinary modifiers due to wife, or something like that at the moment. Because honestly, an Eleanor of Aquitaine might have been a very strong woman who, well, she certainly was, who had particular desires and influences, but those weren't always in favor of her husband. She caused him quite a bit of grief. And the other hand, you know, how do you want to rate her? Do you want to rate her with negative values? She was loved. She was, you know, she had great power within, especially within her own territories, but she had influence within her family that only by making her a standalone character, which this game does not. This game makes the females really just ancillary characters who are at best a shadow of the males. Only by making her a full character would you give her the capability to act on her own. And therefore, you know, her stats, if she, the way my game worked, the important thing wasn't just the dynasty you belonged to, but who had influence on you. So the dynastic concerns, you know, you might have a head of the dynasty at a particular time, and their particular concerns would be reflected within the dynasty by influence markers within that dynasty that, you know, might be bonused by being the same family, but in order to represent the kinds of stuff that happened, say with Eleanor's sons, you would have to be able to have either independent actor characters or have them influenced by other players in some way. Maybe, you know, through whatever means. But anyway, the point is that depending on how you're going to represent things, you know, the amount of detail that you want to have on that, each individual character made sense within the dynasty to me. Of course, there is a sensible thing to moving the spouse over to the dynasty that they're living with at that point. And just that interrelationship between these things created, you know, a real problem for me, and was one of the blocking points, to tell you the truth. The bigger one was how to represent all those interpersonal relationships, which again is trivial in Crusader Kings. And what am I doing babbling about this? Why can't I just play the game? Well, because whatever. The last few days have been intense and disruptive, but the game's not going to play itself, as they say. So let's start with following the sequence of play, and I've got the summary has a better place with it. First thing you hit in each turn is the dynastic sequence. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this for one family and then give kind of a report on the other families, because it's an intensive process. There's a lot of die rolling. There's a lot that goes on in this game. I've heard some people report back, and I kind of remember seeing this in my one play, that, you know, you play for whatever, a period of time in the game where you're looking at a couple of generations and whatnot, and the number of characters in the game just bloats all over the place, which is problematic, and I probably faced these charts in the wrong direction, but we can always do the old wind around. Should be using scrolls, right? All right, let's take the Italians and let's start working our way through. So first there's birth. Each 5-year turn, each player with a married couple with the wife of appropriate age can make a roll. If the result is 7 or more, there's a child on 2 dice. So since I only have one couple, might as well. And let's just throw the dice all over the place so that it's easier to be confused. Oh, tempted to do this. Hold on. I'm just going to do it once because, okay, so we got a 5. That's not going to succeed. I don't like the noise that it makes. And I'm sure it's more irritating on the camera than anywhere else, but that's something I just needed to try. And yes, I could get a different dice cup. I don't know, I no longer have a backgammon game. I left that with my ex-wife. It was my first ex-wife. That's going to be hard to remember to do. Okay, so now I would be allowed to make others, but they have a chance of killing my wife. And my wife has a low constitution, no doubt. So I'm going to hold off on her and not try to spawn again. Now, had they had children, I would be able to, maybe those children would be married and I'd be checking them too. So again, it's a geometric progression. It's not a good thing. So I don't know when I assign titles, but assigning a title is a good idea. And I have a child. We all have a child. Oh, 15 is not old enough. Hold on. I gotta check. I don't think you can have a pawn at 15, which is a little weird because you're talking about 15 and then 20. So like, Alexander the Great was leading armies at 17. And there were quite a few young princes who led forces. So let me make sure I've got that right. To do another video in there, of course, but it is helping me to bring these things out about my personal life. So, although it's affecting the game. Interface. So, at the beginning of the game, even with the optional rules, everybody's equal on taxation. Nobody went to the $7 taxation because there's an enhanced risk of revolt there. And I don't feel like anybody really needs to raise additional capital at this point in the game. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe somebody should take chances. Same thing with the trying to spawn more or whatever. But that's just where I'm going with this. And that comes out to $40 each in the optional rules because each country has exactly 10 provinces, $5 each, but they also each have 2 neutral provinces. In addition to that, each nation gets resources. Now, all the nations have 3 resources at the beginning of the game. However, with the optional rules, they don't. So let's take a look at a couple. France and Spain, they still have their 3 resources, but the other 3 nations each have 1 resource. Nope, Italy does too. The other 2 nations, England and Germany, who have a doubling up of a resource, don't have that extra resource at the beginning of the game. That strikes me as a significant balancing problem, which I don't see as a difficulty in the game, but the game feels like they made a real attempt to try to balance the initial sizes. I have to say that balancing feels like the kind of balancing you have in diplomacy, which is like, yeah, but Germany, Austria, and to a lesser extent Italy are sitting Germany and Austria are kind of sitting in the middle of everything. And they have a much different job to do. And in this game, that's already the case. France borders everyone, basically. No one else is in that position. Spain is here only bordering France. Yes, they might end up in a situation with Italy because they're so close by boat. France and England, well, with Calais, they're next to each other, but then there's also the boat issue there. Obviously, Germany is close to 3 of the 4 other players. So, your initial situation, even though it may technically have been the same or somewhat the same under the normal game, it's not under this. I've got to point out one thing about components. These little neutral flags are not that distinguishable from the resources that are on the board. I find that kind of difficult to cope with. Now, the other things, here it's kind of annoying. Removing famine. Counters. What was counters? I went to look for it. No, it's removing famine counters, which would have been obvious if I saw the next one. Maintaining forces. Nobody starts with any forces, but now comes the raising of forces. Now remember, this is done in kind of a Pax Britannica type fashion, which is to say that any player can say, I'm building X. So in order to do this, we kind of have to look at what the effect of maintenance is, which is 2 crowns per army and fleet, and then the actual building. Well, the building is especially easy right now, which is to say armies aren't just built at the capital. They can be built anywhere on the board. Is that a huge deal? Maybe, maybe not. But I think everybody's going to throw down their 10 pieces. The only problem with that is, what do we want them to be? Do some of us want boats? And what is the advantage of having a navy at this point in the game? Obviously, England is more interested in a navy probably than anyone else. Everyone, by the way, these mountains and forests and stuff, they're just graphics. They have no effect on play, which is kind of a pity. Given that we have our neutrals to capture, etc., I think everyone but England is pretty much going to build armies, but I may roll some dice to see how many boats they might want. I could see any nation wanting some boats, and I'll use that to kind of help direct their diplomacy, that decision. It's kind of a weird situation. It's like, if you were playing this game opposed, you would think, what's my strategy, and have decided this kind of through the dynastic era. I think everybody's very tentative in the game and they want to grab their stuff. But I'm going to allow this decision. So instead of making the decision of, well, what's my diplomatic stance, I'm going to allow this decision on the boats to impact that diplomatic stance, strangely enough. Because it's easier to do this discreetly rather than try to come up with some overall goal based on, hey, what resources do I have to grab? Now, England really needs to grab this grain location so that they can start, getting that excess piece that they can trade away. Likewise, Germany with this, but other people, they may be a little bit more willing to avoid grabbing the neutrals first if they can land a hammer blow. And in particular, one thing to look at with that, and again, I'm just spitballing here about what I'm going to do because I haven't faced this solo, so it's kind of hard to understand. But hey, I look at Italy and they have a strength +2. Man, maybe I want to jump and do something. So I'm going to kind of do some of my initial diplomacy there, but I don't think anybody's making any deals, which they could have made down in the dynastic phase, to transport resources yet. Nobody has a full set that they can trade something for quite yet. Because again, nobody starts with a full set, right? But nobody has an excess piece. You could argue, well, France, doesn't need their semi-luxury, Spain doesn't need and Italy doesn't need their luxury, obviously. But it's a little harder to make the argument overall. So I'm going to delay that decision, although I may backload some discussion based on the army creation, which is kind of a weird thing. But again, it's just a matter of, I don't know how to formulate my diplomacy well enough to just do it on a die roll. But if I do die rolls on what military forces I'm creating, that may impact, that may be indicative of some diplomacy that should have happened, and I may go back and do that just based on those. unfortunate to my decision forming process. What's in here? Oh, yeah. Is strength is the last number in the player card. Same on here. Which means that, and it's also the most complicated to assess because I have to count the wife in too. So, you know, I got a +3, +3. Those are really just +2s, a +1, a +1, and a +3. So everybody's actually pretty decent. Nobody's lacking too badly, and nobody has, yeah, the best you have is a +1 advantage. So I don't see too much of that factoring into the decision. But the reason I say it's kind of lousy is that getting that quick, oh, I'm good at military assessment is not trivial. Now, obviously, once we have princes and everything all over the board who are 20 years old and can lead armies, wow, that kind of assessment becomes a lot harder. But at the beginning of the game, everything is so light in this game. And unbelievably so, sort of, right? It's as if Adam and Eve have just shown up in each country, you know? I don't know that it's going to get that much better when I start putting extra control markers and armies and stuff on the board. The counter mix is very uniform in appearance, and everything kind of blends into each other. To jump back to an earlier point, I am considering rolling back rather than going the route that I just explained, where I'm going to look at each country individually, kind of like I would in packs, and maybe negotiate stuff out before going forward. So, because I was immediately thinking, you know what, Britain would kind of like to have a deal with France because I already own Calais. Now, the game kind of suggests, hey, as Britain, just give up Calais, man. Yeah, but there's two reasons you wouldn't. One is if you can come to an agreement to France that preserves Calais, which is kind of a thorn in France, in exchange for some kind of alliance to work against someone that France is worried about. Another option is to exchange Calais with France as part of an agreement, as part of a generalized peace where maybe you're directing the attentions more towards where France is interested, or where England is interested in. I'm not sure. Shooey. Yeah, I don't know. Do I have more neutral flags? I do. I could actually mark these guys as neutral, just to help me see that they're actual spaces on the board. Yeah. But I'm having a hard time grasping that, and I have this with diplomacy too. How do I make that deal? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a die, a 10-sider, 5 countries, see who cuts the first cheese. Deal. Okay, so and I do this. This is sort of a mechanism I came up with in Civ 2, another game where things are kind of deterministic, although there's luck in this. So 5 gets me to there, 6, 7. So France is going to try to cut the first deals. And for that, France will try to cut. One of the problems is there's nowhere to write these kind of informal agreements, right? But France is going to try to cut some kind of deal that they feel is the most beneficial to them. Which country would they most like to work with then? And forget about the taxation and whatnot, because I might change my taxation decisions. Which again, there's no way to mark down. And I was thinking I'd use these suckers, which I have kicking around. There's no way to mark down these inherent sort of, hey, I went with the heavy taxation. But yeah. So what would France make as its first kind of, what am I most worried about? Well, I don't have much border with Germany. We've got a lot of neutrals here. So even though under a normal game I would say Germany would be my biggest worry. But honestly, I think it's Spain. This is not really in Spain's interest, but could I come up with some deal with Spain? So my stuff is I need a sack of food. Somebody with a sack of food would be the person I most want to deal with. Kind of sounds like England. So yeah, I'm going to pursue the, hey, give me Calais. Now, there's something I don't understand or don't remember, is can I just move a stack of units into Calais and capture it? And this doesn't require any marriage or anything. I can just seize it with an informal agreement, because we're at war or whatever. So let me see whether I need my king piece to do that. There's no specific restriction on that, which is if I can come to an agreement that works. So what kind of agreement can I offer England in exchange for that? Well, England is going to eventually have extra sack of food. They need sheep. This is what's kind of hard, is the remembering these informal agreements. And I don't know quite what I'm going to do to express this. I don't know how much expressivity I need here. In many games, all I do is put a counter, put something of the same color, and I'm just indicating, yeah, we're friends, But that, and I could use other things like dice or some other colored implement. But that may not express enough to be able to say, you know what, this is our broad plan of friendship, which seems more expressive. So France is going to say something like, well, I'd like to get rid of Calais, and I would support you in, how can we get you wool? Andalusia is probably your closest wool, so maybe support England in an engagement against Spain. And what would I get with Spain? Well, I would love to grab this and be the dominating force on semi-luxuries. That would be a really powerful position. So I'm going to propose something vaguely along those lines. Is that reasonable to England? We'd be giving up a territory, and let's say we'll give them access. We'll let England take, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 territories in Spain. We'll take the other 4. I don't think that sounds unreasonable. So on an odd, this deal is accepted. It is accepted. So England and France have this general deal. Now, how am I going to notate this? I don't fucking know. Because I kind of want to scribble it down. It's not a formal treaty of any kind. It's just sort of an understanding at the beginning of the game. Hey, I think this will work. And then I'll go and randomly pick another player to make another deal. If I didn't believe that the deal was a reasonable one from both players, I wouldn't do that odds even check, right? It would have to feel okay. So now we go to the second such deal, if there are going to be so many. And we'll roll to see who gets to make it. So Italy gets to propose a deal. Now, we don't know what England and France have discussed, and there could be conflicting deals in the sense that, like, France could be lying to England about their deal and have some secret treaty with Spain as well. You start doing that kind of shit, and you may find that you're very quickly in trouble. But I get my cheap gain right away. It might work out just fine. So what's Italy's worry? Italy's worry is really Germany, I would say. That's where they have their biggest, wow, I'm exposed heavily with two of my resources right on the German border. And an Italian-German treaty against France, or operations against France, in kind of the long term, seems like a good idea. I don't know what's my trade deal here. So I've got sheepies, food, and bonus stuff, and he has metal. So we're looking kind of at not an unreasonable trade arrangement being able to be made. So let's see if that one goes. That one goes as well. This is a deal that Italy controlled, and it definitely is better for Italy than it is for Germany, which you might say, well, maybe I shouldn't be making it then. Yeah, but it still feels fairly balanced to me. Basically what they're saying is, Italy doesn't have any choices but France or Germany in terms of its immediate bordering states. Sure, they could end up with a Spanish war, but the trade situation, Germany is getting food for metal, which is great because metal is going to be my dual. And yes, Italy has something yummy right on their border, but I don't know if how bad that is. Again, I just don't know. It feels a little unbalanced, but again, it was Italy proposing the trade. It's a close to balanced deal. And again, the French deal was probably more balanced. It's that giving Calais away that made sure that we distribute how we're going to deal with Spain in far more detail. And for me, that detail is, it's going to be a 4 out of 10 to France and 6 out of 10 Spanish provinces to England. But that's ultimate optimism. You're not going to take out a country this way, right? You don't. It's very unlikely. So, I mean, it's just kind of this, we'll divide it up, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. All right. Let's check who's going to make the next possible deal. And since there's no limit to these, somebody may end up not making any. Don't know. We're back to France. France is going to have a hard time. They might get some kind of trade deal, but they're not going to get much more than that without somebody violating a deal. So what are they looking at? They're looking at, I'm already getting my grain. No, I want to get metal. Metal is going to be harder to get. The trade association is less positive for England than I thought it was. I thought they were giving away a food. So, gosh, this is really hard. Like, my feeling here is along the lines of, I would like to get metal from you. Maybe. But that's not going to be too easy. Trade for... I'm really not interested in what the Italians have. Spain is probably not terribly interesting. Unless I roll a 6, I think France is going to pass. They've made their only deal that they can make. Now, I would love to make peace treaties with these guys, but I'm getting rebuffed at this point. I got a 6. To me, that means, maybe I'm willing to kind of lie and work with Spain especially since I'm getting rebuffed over here against the Italians. This is going to cause problems, I can tell you, because at least one of these is going to fail. Okay, so what can Spain do trade-wise? Or maybe I could work... Yeah, I don't know. So I have food, sheep. I like metal. Food, sheep here. Italy's not my buddy. I'm gonna swap batteries. Let me think a little bit about how I'm gonna function this. But my feeling was I was at a position where I'm blocked in terms of alliances, which is why I went with the only on a 6 will I be able to even really describe one, because somebody's going to have to violate a deal, and otherwise I can assume that I'm wandering around talking to everyone but like just not really getting any traction. I went with kind of a vague, hey Spain, let's gang up on Italy, and Spain said no, an even die roll, which means I just keep going with the dice rolling. 9 is going to put me to the Italians. The Italians have already engaged one. You know who we'd love to get? We'd love to get Spain in a 3-way alliance to just carve up France, since we haven't like done anything else. What about that? We were very light on this one. Maybe we can bring Spain into our alliance against France. No, we were not able to do that. And I'm going to continue this for a while. The main question is, what can Spain do? You know, so we got an Anglo-French alliance against Spain, an Italo-German alliance against France, and Spain is having some trouble finding a hole. Friends to fit in. And again, the obvious would be to carve that up. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to roll for Spain again to see, because my feeling is we've already canceled this out. We've already canceled the tripartite deal. There is almost nothing available, basically. Now, that tripartite deal could have been just an Italo-Spanish one. But had that worked, maybe we bring Germany in too. I see no problem with that. I could very easily see a game starting off with 4 people saying, let's just divide up France. Fuck it. You know, knock one player out right off the bat. This being a free diplomacy type of game until you get to the royal marriages, those kind of situations don't tend to hold together very well. Like, sometimes it just knocks a player out, but it doesn't necessarily, it tends not to hold up well as any kind of long-term alliances. So what can Spain possibly do? I think the only thing not attempted is the British-Spanish alliance. And let's, on a 6, that something works. Spain is able to approach Britain and say, you know what? Your French deal doesn't really work. Okay, so we're going to hold there with just these 2 deals. Spain is finding itself having a hard time moving forward, but these are long-term deals, which may or may not hold, so it may not be that big a deal. I think going to the 7 purchases for anyone is a bad idea, but I will roll for increased taxation for everyone, in the sense that if anyone gets a 6, they'll at least strongly consider it. Okay, England is considering. And Germany is considering. Why? Geez, I don't know. Okay. Well, let's increase their incomes. I'm not quite sure how to report things. I'm going to put an increased taxes notation here. This was meant to be diplomacy, but whatever. That England and Germany each did increase taxes on this turn, so I can remember that. Now each player in turn is going to build their forces, and that's kind of tricky because what really happens is everybody will buy what they absolutely kind of need to fight their neutrals. But then we'll see where things go from there. You start seeing this kind of diplomacy happening in a game. I want to give the warning, don't try this at home. Unless you're really comfortable and familiar with playing, you know, loose, open-ended negotiations using solo roles. Wow, this one's tough to cope with. And, you know, diplomacy helps me work my way through it, like the game diplomacy, as do things like Pax Britannica and stuff along those lines. Making a mistake by putting these guys here. I think those can only enter play through the event cards. Just as, again, I'm trying to figure out how to do this, not just in terms of the rules of the game, but how to cope with it in a solo situation. But some of it is the rules of the game, you know, like figuring out whether these are available at the beginning. I had to kind of look through some of the optional rules to see that. Rolling through my countries as to, hey, how much are you going to spend? What I'm finding is kind of interesting. 40 bucks buys you 8 units, which is kind of nice for taking your 2 neutrals. And then you can use more money on a later turn to build ships if you need them. So that's what Spain and Italy have done. England, for whatever reason, I jumped and did a partial purchase with them. They're going to want some navies. They took extra cash, so this can't be right. 30? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I guess so. But I'm in no position to be willing to commit that I'm willing to buy more units yet. That's enough for me to have some navies to defend myself against whatever, and to have some armies to take on the neutral in my area. Bothered by the historical aspect, so like, I don't really care if Germany can invade Denmark or Poland, or whether they can only occur in the game through a marriage relationship. But I can damn well tell you that England, of all countries, certainly felt itself capable of invading Wales, kind of at whim. I mean, yeah, sure, there would be dynastic events involved in it, but those were heavily engineered. I mean, it was really a matter of, yeah, you're on my island, man. Who taxed base have thrown all their cash into their armies, take their 2 neutral provinces. That's Italy, France, and Spain. Germany and England played things a little bit more by ear. Now, for whatever reason, Germany has built 2 navies. That's a real threat to England. Now they're worried about, hey, is France in with Germany? That would be a nasty combination. We can see they don't have any navies, but wow. Why does Germany build 2 navies? Germany's building 2 navies because the 2 English navies feel like a threat. The most likely threat there is France and England. The reality is I rolled a 6, but it does seem like there's a sensible threat there in the long run. So I wanted to do that. But that puts, England still has $5 left. Now, I got a couple of choices. I could throw, I could build an extra unit, and that might help me defend Calais. But I think I almost certainly want to build an extra navy. Germany has spent all their points, so I'm just going to do that. And basically everybody has spent all their cash. That 3rd navy will help me prevent crossings. So everybody's happy with what they bought, and now they get to place them. Now I don't think there's any kind of I don't remember first turn placement having any special way of handling where you put the units. Uh-oh. 2 times the number of home provinces. Yeah, nobody has more than 8. That's just armies. Navies don't impact you. I'm not seeing the oh, here we go. Wait. First turn. Army counters. No army counters on the board. All should be raised. You place the troops in front of you. If other players, you can recruit more. Until everybody's satisfied. At this point, they can be placed on the board. Instead of them all being placed in the capital, they should be placed anywhere in the home provinces, one at a time, taking it in turn around the table. Okay, so I'll randomize who has to place their first piece, and then they'll be... so that'll be the English. And let me get rid of the money. Put all the pieces down here, but... yeah. Reasons you might not want your whole army on the board at the beginning of the game, because you have to pay maintenance for it, and also the game is won by having the most money at the end. But I think the assumption is that you will be keeping your maximum size army most of the time, because unless you're in a position where you're kind of unassailable and you can get away with less, which can happen. You know, you might be in a corner of the board like England or whatever, and able to devote yourself more to trade. So I've set everybody up like this, and England's just gonna put a piece. France will put a piece. Well, why are there? There we go. Put a piece there. You know, and Spain will put a piece, and etc. I'll just keep going around doing that. There's not a lot to this, to tell you the truth. And pretty much consolidated my forces. It's not good to have your troops, you know, caught in small groups by the enemy. It might have made the most sense to just have everything stacked together, but who knows, maybe I want to make an advance with France into someone or whatever. I don't think so on this first turn. I think these vague ideas, although I spent a lot of effort on them, they might fall apart before they ever get engaged, because again, well, I'm going to take my Calais. So that's the end of the interphase, and now we're going to be going to the movement phase, which is the meat of the game. And we'll hold off on that a little bit. Remember, there's going to be 3 movement phases. And this one, this is not well. Yeah, it's event movement, and then there's another event movement because I'm playing the optional roles. But yeah, I'm going to take me a nice break before I get to that. I don't expect to see a whole hell of a lot happening this turn, but, you know, some attacks on the neutrals. We'll see what the events and other things draw. So France is going to be our first country. Okay. Now, because they're the first player, we draw an event card, which hopefully would shuffle. Bastard! All players with unmarried kings should make immediate birth rolls. If successful, the king is sired a bastard. A character sheet should be created and passed to the player to the right, who controls the character from then on. If the bastard lands in a home province of the country of origin, you make a rebellion roll. Now, I wouldn't go with the character to the player to the right. I would actually randomize who gets it more than that. Make a rebellion roll. If the king dies without leaving a male heir, make a rebellion rolls for all home provinces. Well, nobody has this situation. All the kings are married currently. Okay, and that is the only event card for the first movement phase, no matter who goes. So we want to grab our territories, and we're gonna mark. We're just gonna grab these things like this. And now, let me make sure that I'm right, but if I'm right, there's going to be 2 neutral armies in each of these that I have to fight. At the same time, I'm going to suck my my pieces in. 1, 2, 3. Everything's going to collect up here in Champagne. I'm not going to be able to make an exchange this turn. Let's see. France is dealing with England. England would be giving metal for cloth in an exchange, and neither one's in a position to do that. So we'll just do it this way. Otherwise, I could trace movement, you know, elsewhere. I think they have like a movement range of 6, but it's at least 4. Something has 6, something has 4, and I think the armies have 4 and the goods have 6. I'm not using the optional rule that's just, well, I can just trace anywhere, because I think that one kind of causes issues. And I take care of the first of the battles, which I'll do in Burgundy because that's where the ruler is, because it's a little bit more exciting. So the first thing that happens is we check to see if the ruler gets an advantage here. He's got a strength of 1. The guile doesn't add anything. It's a 0. So I've got a +1. That means I get 1 extra die. I've got 4 units, so I can use that. I could have sent more, but... And I roll a die. And I have like a 50% chance of wiping the enemy out in the pre-battle roll. I get a 4, that succeeds. I have captured Burgundy. It's now part of my kingdom, and it counts as home country because of that. And that's all that happens. Okay, had that not succeeded in wiping them out, we would go to this next step, which I'm making the attack here, where I've got 4 infantry against 2 infantry, and we roll around the battle. Okay, the 4 doesn't hit because I rolled a 6, and the 2 actually kills 2 French infantry. These go here, I believe, and I'll be back in 10 years. Okay? And they'll just show back up in the force pool. I would like to win the extra unit. I'm going to take a shot here at 2 on 2. This is not great. Okay, but I get a success. The blue die is the French. They end up wiping this out. And we've also gained Flanders. Now, obviously, though, you know, we've taken a couple hits. That may mean that we're a tasty treat for Germany or something. That's it for the French turn. So now the French player shakes the cup up and draws a chit for someone. This is going to be Germany. No event card is drawn. And again, I got these 3 little markers here. I'm going to use them for my movement markers. I got this little piece of plastic here to help remind me. Maybe I'll use a coin. I don't know. But now Germany's got kind of an interesting option. We could just launch an attack on the French. On the other hand, we could do that later. Let's see. The German leader has a stronger strength, so I feel pretty safe. I am going to also scoop up all my goods. Right? I have a metal and a sheep. I could send something into Italy as part of a trade arrangement, and then hope Italy sends something to me. That's how you have to kind of do it. But I'll just collect up my goods for now and see what happens. I'm going to move these down here and these up here. And again, we've got 2 troops on each. We'll roll up another battle, see if it's a little bit more interesting. I don't know. I mean, the system's pretty simple. Let's go with the ruler first. Let me... Try to center on the game while not there. Okay, so I get a special die roll for my leader. I make it more than one. Because I have a leadership of 2, I think I actually get 2 pre-battle rolls. Alright, I'll grab another die. And I've got 4 strength, so 1 through 4 is hit. My leader's quite good. I probably should have split my troops differently, but okay, I do 3 hits. That's going to be enough to successfully take Swabia. Now, Swabia is the less important of the 2, actually, I think, isn't it? Friesland has the medal, so I kind of screwed up there. I don't get a pre-battle roll there. All I get is a 4 versus a 2. Neither of us hit. What happens? Good question. I think we have the option to retreat. Yeah. We have the option to retreat, but the neutrals cannot. We can't surrender or anything like that with neutrals. So we'll just roll another attack. And do we really need the chart there? I don't know. The answer is no, actually. Okay, well, this is... Okay, now we wiped them out. And we've gained our homeland. Pretty exciting, huh? That's the core of the game. Again, it's a pretty simple system. For, you know, how you handle all the other stuff. Yeah, there's a little bit with the trading goods, and there's some complexity in handling some of the aspects of it, but for the most part, that is the game. But in terms of, like, you know, a land military simulation, which it's not. Hence they say it's not a war game. I kind of have my mix on it, you know, it's like, feels like there is a war game in here, but it's a real simple one. I've seen things that aren't more complex than this, that don't have all this dynastic stuff and the trade and everything. So I'm like, whatever. You know, it's making some attempt to simulate something, I think, or at least to tell a story. But the framework doesn't... So the real problem is the game is supposed to be focused on the dynastic side, and the dynastic side just isn't sufficient. But I've said that before, and I'll say it again stronger. So we draw another chip. And this time we get the Italians. So we zoomed through everyone except England at this point. Nobody had anything too exciting. I don't think anybody took a loss, except for the French. The English are a little interesting because they have a fleet. I forgot about the German fleet entirely, which means I can probably safely not send the English fleet out. The English have a larger fleet and can block an invasion route. I don't feel terribly threatened because there aren't a lot of Germans up here. My English forces could probably handle them. So I will simply... I guess I'm going to actually move there and there. The English take their territories as well. I forgot to scoop up my goodies. Everybody has done that. And where are we? Well, we've just set things up so that the neutral provinces didn't matter one bit. That's the whole effect that they had on play, basically. Is the first movement phase of the first turn, it had an impact. Whoopee. All right. We throw everything back in the cup and shake it up real good. And before I draw another one, I'm taking another damn break. But there'll be another event card for the first player. And we'll see if that shakes things up any. I think we're going to start seeing invasions. I really wasn't thinking too much about it, but yeah. Those neutral territories, which, you know, represent different things. It's the Reconquista in Spain. It's, I don't know, the 19th century unification of Italy. France had huge problems at this time. You're talking Burgundy there, you know. Germany, well, it's kind of hard to say what the German one might represent, just like with the Italian one, because again, the Empire was something different. For the English, I don't know if it's supposed to be the War of the Roses. It's way too early if it is, or just general northern disruption that happened with Yorkshire. I don't think that the game is ever successfully portraying anything at any level. It gives you some hints of this, hey, we can, handle dynasties in the obvious way. And that's about all that it kind of adds to the world of gaming. What about these other things? Trading the goods, it's a cute little thing. And it makes sense because the game is about money. And that's it. It's who has the most money wins. We'll see how much stomach I have for this. One of the factors is everything that comes from it is kind of emergent. It comes from the diplomacy and the deals that you cut, etc. And the mechanisms that are in place for the game are so loose, and in some cases a little not terribly well defined, that it's hard to really justify that there's so here's one example. Let's say it starts playing out like a diplomacy game, which is what it feels like it's going to do, right? France and England are going to go beat up on Spain. Germany and Italy are going to beat up on France. Spain will probably keep fighting France or whatever, or maybe it'll just be England and Spain fighting each other. However things fall together, it's going to be kind of like a diplomacy game. But somebody's countries are going to get overrun and just wiped out. And then they've just got a landless lord or a landless dynasty. The hard part to all of this is the capital. The capital is quite strong. It's a 10-strength force. But that's not enough to handle 2 players. On the other hand, there's really no capacity to do any kind of alliances yet. Any kind of formal alliances. So you can't really operate with each other unless I'm missing something. I vaguely remember something that may allow that. Because there's some really ill-defined stuff in here, like I was saying. Like you can intervene in somebody else's country and it causes penalties for them, and it's just not really nailed down at all well. So there might be some capability to stow some of your troops with someone else who's not an ally without fighting them. But anyway, I think that what we're going to see is a player or two basically knocked out of the game right away, which doesn't represent, the royal dynamics at all, and unable to really get their territory back for large periods of time, and only able to come back into the game really because of struggles between other players. Or maybe the event deck, I don't know. But it looks like it's going to devolve into warfare right away. That didn't happen when I played it opposed. Not that I recall. I think we kind of just sat around and cut deals trading goods, which may be the intention of the game, but quite honestly, if you're trying to win it, knocking people on their ass seems well worthwhile. This turn order can serve as a sort of inhibitor to aggressive action. So for example, Germany got a draw early. Last turn, they might have come storming over. I'm not so sure they want to this turn. And we get free companies. 1 to 3 free companies loose in Europe. Players should invest crowns to hire their services. Now invest, so there's 2 things. There's bid and invest. Invest, I believe, is basically sealed bids. There's 2 people who could buy. Nobody else has cash on hand. again, that's an artifact of this being the beginning of the game. Later in the game, at some point, people are going to have surplus money. But right now, to get the armies necessary to like take their 2 neutral areas, they needed to spend most of their money. The player bidding the most has the right to place them anywhere on the map he or she chooses. They can be used as mercenaries and moved by the owning player as any normal army counter. They cost nothing to maintain, but the player owning the province in which they finish must pay 5 crowns to the treasury or place a famine marker. Uh-oh. What's the storms here? I think that means there's also a storms roll, because I don't have that on this one. It's not like it's a... Wow, I wasn't expecting that to... I was expecting to draw a card and it said storms. Nobody's at sea, so I don't have to worry about storms. But yeah, there's going to be 1 free company. Now, this is weird. What do I represent them with? I got a mercenary captain counter that can go on top of a neutral army. I think that's how it works. Okay, well, this is an interesting turn. If people tie, I think nobody gets it. Investing, all secretly record how many crowns. These amounts should be revealed. The player investing the largest amount has the advantage. All players then pay the amount of the investment in crowns to the treasury. Ooh. So this is a weird situation where Germany and England both have a buck. I feel like they both have to bid their buck and waste it, because a buck for an army is too good a deal and you can't let the other person have it. That's assuming money was open, but it essentially is known. It's basically trackable hidden information at this point. Okay. And now I make my decision with Germany. Do I want to dive in to French territory right off the bat? Well, this I know. There's 4 of these, and I've got 4. I've got a better leader. I could bring these in. I could probably wipe out the French army. Let's go for it. It's what we agreed to do. Now, let's take a look at the combat rules a little bit. God, I hate glossy books. Okay, the Royale can run away all by himself. At the start of a round, either player can choose to retreat. The opposing player is allowed a free attack. Huh. And the pre-battle roll, I believe that's what it's called. Yeah, it's before all the rounds of combat. It's basically 1 die roll. So, I should have a blue die somewhere. I don't know what happened to it. There it is. Alright, so we pre-battle roll. The French, again, have 1 strength. The Germans, even though they add up to 3, it's limited to 2. The Queen doesn't add infinitely, although some things do, which pisses me off, because I'd like a general roll, not all these special cases that are... And it's all just spread out throughout the book. That means that the Germans get 1 free roll, and they have at least 6 armies. So they do 2 hits on the French. And again, the French are getting their asses kicked here. Okay. Now, the start of a round of combat, I can retreat. That will give the Germans a free die roll against me. I could flee the battle at any time. I already did my pre-battle. I used my strength bonus in the pre-battle. Okay, well, we'll fight the round and see what happens. But we may well be captured or killed here, which would be bad. You know, again, the game can be decided very early, I think. So all those dynastic rules and everything, you know, it's going to take us down to about here. Well, we've got one 5-year-old, so he has military effect as early as 13, 15. But the game could essentially be almost over by then. It's that fast. Okay, the Germans rolled a 5. Their leader, being a king, means that they do 5 hits. The French do a 3. They have 3 points of units, 2 regular units plus their leader. So they actually do 3 hits to the Germans. And obviously I won't take my king for that. So more French pieces, German pieces. Now, there's a desire to turtle. You know, so now the Germans are a little weaker than they would have been if they hadn't attacked. Does that matter? I don't know. The only person that really impacts is Italy. And probably everybody is going to sweep in and grab French territory because it's the safest choice. Let me see what happens with that leader. I am debating whether or not that third campaign spot is a good idea. It's an optional role, and the problem with it is that it starts to make this too much a game of conquest, which I think it already is feeling too much like, and also from a historical point of view, you know, taking something like Burgundy over in a couple months is pretty severe already. You know, and we've seen the Germans, for example, took Swabia, Friesland, and Burgundy, all 3 of them, in the course of 5 years. Yeah, not 1, 5 years. Okay, that is not unbelievable. Yeah, I buy the 3 campaign seasons over 5 years. I don't buy 3 campaign seasons a year, which is what I was afraid we were looking at here. But no, it's not the case. It's 3 campaign seasons over 5 years. I think that's fair. Somewhat unrealistically, the way you check whether someone survives a battle, if their piece would be eliminated, they have to make a survival roll. I have a constitution at +1. There's a -1 to it. He's 25 years old, so he needs a 4 or better. And that's on 2 dice again. He barely succeeds and is now captured. Okay, so the French king is captured. He's not in play anymore. He could be ransomed off for something. There's not much to offer right now. I can't make any kind of formal agreement, although I could do immediate transfer. Hey, give me some bucks, I'll give you your king back, or something of that sort. And that is the end of the German turn. You probably can see what I'm picking, but I can't. And that puts us to the Spaniards, and the Spaniards are like, screw it, man, look, France. We're going to grab some territory in France. Now, because the French army is wiped out, basically, there's 2 pieces up here, and I think they can make it, you know, at least 4 spaces. I got to throw a little bit of defense everywhere, but I can grab, I don't think these are adjacent, I can grab these 2 adjacent spaces very easily. I had to look up the movement rules because of Italy. Let me just tell you where we're at here. So Spain grabbed the 2 areas. France marched in and grabbed Friesland. I could have actually grabbed 2 spaces from Germany, whatever, I don't know. Probably the safest thing would be to go back to Champagne, but, I'm hoping some kind of fight breaks out somewhere. And now we're at an interesting position where Italy is up. So I had to look up the movement cost, the movement allowance for units. Resources are indeed 4 spaces. Armies are only 3. So that's going to slow things down, and I'm probably not going to be able to launch any kind of attack. I could try to screw Germany over with my Italians, but that doesn't seem terribly wise. Germany is at least nominally my ally. So we're going to march up here. We didn't build any boats, so we can't like go storming into Spain. Probably a mistake, right? And that leaves us with England as the next. Now, England has some interesting situations. Because I own Calais and Kent, I can move across. 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure about movement of leaders. Might be faster. No, kings and princes are also 3. So 1, 2, 3 to Kent. And I feel safe with my navy because the German navy still hasn't moved, because I can't imagine why Germany has a navy. And now England is positioned to also take French territory as need be. That's the end of the second. Immediately violent start to a game is odd for me. Usually in games in which there's room for diplomacy, negotiation, etc., I don't jump off to this kind of start. In fact, in Titan, I've always been about building up forces, and then I learned, wow, you can make Titan a really interesting game by stomping someone on the first turn. With your Titan, you're able to bring your angel into that battle, so you're almost certain to win. And if you get the other guy's Titan, you knock him out, and you get kind of more points than you would otherwise. If you don't, you still probably are going to win the battle, and it's pretty impressive. So it's really an interesting option. It can put you behind in some ways, but then you have the strongest piece on the board because your Titan is going to be 1 or 2 points stronger, so that's actually pretty cool. Let me think. The other game that I recall where there was where there was a real interesting choice of just slamming into someone initially was Stellar Conquest. In Stellar Conquest, unlike SE4X, the GMT game that came out, I don't know, 12 years ago, whatever. Recently, unlike that game where it kind of sets you up far apart usually, there's some random ways it might not, but also you really don't have much force when you hit someone. Stellar Conquest has sort of such a slow ramp up that the movement speed of units going across the board is fast enough that you could actually conquer someone's home planet with not a complete surprise move, but an impressive move. It is a definite option in the game. But for me, I'm always of the, I ought to play it out and, let the game kind of develop a little bit. Another one where it's similar is Pax Britannica. It turns out that if England can start the Great War and not get blamed for it very early in the game, they actually just win the game. Now, England can always win Pax Britannica, in my opinion, unless somebody does something really cheap that ends up making someone else just win. But it does make it a very fast game that doesn't fit, what you're thinking of. Yeah, I've also seen a game of Dune end on turn 2, for that matter, where, whatevers. But yeah, it's Dune usually doesn't go very many turns, or it goes forever. It just depends on the nature of how balance works out in it. But yeah, this is, again, not what I expected this game to devolve into. I would have thought everybody kind of sits back, negotiates, gets some dynasties, etc. The big problem is there weren't wars like this, right? There weren't a case, there just wasn't a case where Germany attacks France. Spain attacks France, Italy attacks France, England attacks France. It just wasn't something like that. There was a certain degree of balance of power. There also was no real ability to assimilate land quickly. England took huge swaths of France, but they didn't gain much out of it. It was not economically viable. It barely, it wasn't sustaining itself. The English crown was going into debt trying to hold all that territory. So this kind of very naive sort of view just does that, right? Where it's like, yeah, I can control, I can have a bigger income because I've just taken all, a big chunk of France's territory. That's not actually how it worked. But it doesn't really matter. Now, I wanted to look up a few things here before I go on, don't I? I know I had some thoughts. I don't remember what they were. I had some things I wanted to look up, and now I'm kind of like, geez, I ended up grabbing the video again instead of looking them up. And I'm just like kind of lost. Nobody's got the strength to take the capital on easily. Although the Germans would get 2 extra rolls with 6 pieces. They might be able to capture the capital and all the yummies inside of it. Don't think anybody else is it. Well, England might be able to too. How good? Who do they have here? Yeah, they got a +3 leader too. +2 essentially. So they also are not in a bad position there. What was I going to look up? I cannot remember. I thought I had something I was going to look up. Now, with the leader outside his home country, and that's true in all of these, in every country except for, well, England and Italy have their leader inside their home country. That means those countries that don't have their king in their home country actually have a penalty if a revolt comes up. Okay, so England is going to go first. Let's draw their event card. Famine. Crops have failed in parts of Europe. Roll a dice to determine how many provinces are affected and select them from... Ooh, they've got a list rather than the randomizer. And then there's also storms, but again, the English didn't put their fleet at sea. Oh, that's what I was going to look up. What's up with the naval movement? Because I don't remember. I always forget the naval rules, damn it. But again, the German army is not poised to invade England, so their fleet is kind of useless. The English fleet, on the other hand, could do something, but there aren't enough German ships to stop them. Take care of this famine. How many famine? Just 1. And that's going to be, let's make sure there's 6 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So that's going to be Algarve. Should be in Spain. Portugal. What does that mean? I don't know. I think it means it doesn't generate income. Storms don't matter. What do the English want to do? Last round of the turn. I think they want to take lots of French stuff. As much as they can. As much as they can isn't much. It's basically Flanders and Normandy. Maybe take something using boats, or just pile everybody into Champagne and try to take the resources. I wanted to look up before and again is the naval rules, and they're as insipid as I recalled. Fleets can move 3 areas. And they can carry up to 6 armies and king or prince counters combined. And unlimited resources, they can combine land and sea, as long as everything has its own movement points adhered to. If it encounters fleets from another player's country and that opposing force is greater in size, they must cease for that turn without a battle. They can move the next turn. I don't believe they can stay at sea with armies, but I'm not sure. No, they can. Okay. Nah. All right. What that means is that I could send ships down and grab all kinds of stuff down here. Problem with that? Spain. I can take Normandy and Brittany. Well, Normandy I can reach anyway. I can take Brittany, but if I take Aquitaine or Bordeaux, I have to worry about Spain potentially trying to get into me. Now, this would be a great time to be talking to Italy, especially as England, or maybe Germany even, about can we get Spain out of the way? And likewise, Spain would love to talk to Italy. However, you're not allowed to do that. You're only allowed to talk if you have men in the same place. It might be possible to walk into Burgundy and talk. But I think that would result... I could do it with just a unit and then flee. And that I don't know if that would allow me to negotiate and move other pieces based on that negotiation. It's supposed to be the man on the scene situation. So I don't really think you should be allowed to like make deals for other troops that would be moving at the same time. That feels to violate the concept, but again, the rules are pretty damn vague. Oh, and you can't move into these, I think. I think since England is going first, they want to take the safer route, which really means abandoning all this stuff. And we'll see what shakes out from that. At the very least, Italy is getting the shaft in this turn and may end up doing something, because of that. This move, I picked up a unit 1, 2, 3, landing, capturing here. Moved someone out of Calais and the rest into Flanders, grabbing that. Grab 3 more provinces. That'll increase my tax base, and it looks pretty sweet to me. And yeah, storms are no problem as long as you keep landing on the coast. Of course, you can't go very far, but 1, 2, 3. 3, I could have gotten to Aquitaine. It's not that painful. Yeah, I don't know why ships would be at sea for more than a year, though. That would terrify me. If they're no, just no. So that puts me on to Italy. Italy, unfortunately, has to go next. The Spanish king is not that good. The Italian king is that good. I may want to go in there. I'm going to make this an odd-even choice because, geez, man. No, I'm going to go to 1 through 4. I'm going to go violent. Yeah, because I've got a vague alliance with the Germans. Maybe it'll carry over against Spain now that France is gone. Maybe it won't. But I've got to make up some ground. I can't be the only person going backwards here. We're completely successful. Defeated the Spaniards again. There could be some kind of arrangement, but it's hard. If you have fistfuls of cash, you might be able to buy your way out of a bad situation. And next is the Germans. What's up with the Germans? Well, golly. We don't like this particularly. That's nice territory that we're losing. And we don't really have a huge army. So while we can take Anjou, we probably can't, take Champagne, or certainly don't want to beat up on the Italians. That the diplomatic situation is being inherently influenced by the chit pull here. Maybe Germany would do something. If not, Spain hasn't gone yet. They could seize territory from Germany. Is that what we want to do? Do we want to make an enemy? Or maybe if we leave Germany alone, it'll just be us fighting Italy. I don't know. And it is Spain, given how late we're going in the turn, and that only France has not gone. I think we want to capture Aquitaine and Bordeaux. And maybe we saw Italy and Germany talking to each other, but we're not going to chance anything. Anyhow, we are going to fall back to Aragon. That helps cover La Mancha. Actually, why don't we just fall all the way back to La Mancha and not lose our army there? So then we get 2 more Spanish territories with resources in them, and we're not doing that badly. Okay, so Italy's not the only one falling back. Italy would be the only one holding place and treading water. France very clearly was falling back. But Spain's got a problem. They've lost their king. That's not good. And there's no way to recover that. Because it's the beginning of the game. If you let the game play out a little bit and the king's captured, well, maybe some prince or something is on the board and is of age already. Maybe you've got other leaders that you can move around and do stuff with. But at this point, you've got one leader, and if you lose that leader, you've fucked up. And the question is, well, does that mean you just want to be peaceful? Well, you're not particularly safe in your own borders unless you hide deep inside and you don't risk your king. That's an option, and maybe that's how I played it, or saw it played the first time, was that people really weren't exposing their leaders to the possibility of getting knocked out. Certainly if you start seeing that, though, boom, it starts going hard. Finally, France. France has absolutely nothing they can do. That is, I believe, the end of the turn. Players can cash in resources. Nobody's got a full set. You don't start with one, nobody traded. So we will be going to the 1305 turn. And one nation's been destroyed almost. They still have Champagne. But that's it. And, England might be like, I might be able to free your leader for you, depending on what's going on. So we may be seeing an Italy versus Spain, England versus Germany type breakout instead of what we were expecting. That's fine. I'm going to load this one up, but, obviously this is not only not a historically plausible situation at all, but also not kind of what you expected of the game. You're expecting that it would allow you to kind of start generating these dynasties and everything. Well, boom, somebody's out of the game. Damn near, Somebody's got their king out, and it's going to be, I don't know, how long for him? He's got Juan, who was born in 1300, so, he's got 4 more turns or so before he shows up with another leader. Yeah, what's up? We might see it down to like 2 countries, basically, with some dispossessed dynasties floating around. And of course, the events can bring stuff. There's no question about that. But, again, not exactly what I was expecting from this. Certainly not what I saw last time I played it, where we all kind of turtled for whatever reason. We weren't playing with any of the optionals, so there was no need to go conquer stuff. So as an early moving player, you don't want to expose your king. And as a later moving player, capturing somebody's territory might mean that you're in trouble. taking somebody's territory might mean that, well, you know, let's say you're France, the worst case, who can't be aggressive basically under those circumstances. But almost anyone except for England or Spain, if there are no boats for Italy or whatever, almost anyone is going to expose some of their own territories if they send a big enough army to deal with the other person. So maybe the basic game just makes more sense, because the advanced game, you have this desire to grab that neutral territory. And that neutral territory, in some cases at least, is sitting right on the border of someone else's territory. Anyway, yeah, this was not what I expected to see this game turn into. All right, let's load this one up. And I'll be going into less detail and maybe less angst on the next ones. But yeah.